Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Polly Dinette-Claw. Earlier this year, Leonard Peltier was released after 49 years in prison. ICT revisits Peltier's first interview with Graham Lee Brewer from the Associated Press as he talks about what freedom feels like and why he's still fighting.
I'm here in Belcourt, North Dakota at the Turtle Mountain Reservation to speak with Leonard Peltier, who did an exclusive interview with the Associated Press after being released from prison after 49 years. Peltier was an active member of the American Indian movement in the early 1970s and was on the Pine Ridge Reservation to provide protection to Native people there. He became involved in a firefight with FBI agents where 2 lost their lives. After fleeing to Canada, he was extradited to the United States where he was tried and given 2 consecutive life sentences.
I didn't kill nobody. I didn't shoot nobody. And there's no evidence that I did. Because they wanted revenge and they didn't know who was responsible. And they said, put the full weight of the American government on Leonard Peltier. We need a conviction. And when they say that, you don't have no rights.
Leonard Peltier was in his early 30s when he first entered federal prison, and now at 80, he's experiencing a number of health conditions and, of course, trying to adjust to the world on the outside after nearly half a century behind bars.
I've only been out, a week? And I'm having a hard time believing this has actually really happened for me. It's all been a shock to me. And I don't know, I feel so honored that, it's hard, just not crying.
For many Native Americans across the country, Leonard Peltier represents broader injustices visited on Indigenous people by the American government. But to law enforcement, he's seen as a remorseless killer who's never taken accountability for the deaths of 2 agents on the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1975. Although back in his homelands, Peltier remains on home confinement. Although he says that doesn't deter his activism. He plans to keep fighting for Indigenous rights and tribal self-determination.
I didn't really know if we were successful or not when I was sitting in prison, in a prison cell. And to know that our young people are standing up and saying, no more, no more. We're not going to let you do this. We're gonna resist. And it makes me feel so good, man. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't give my life for nothing.
Graham Lee Brewer of the Associated Press shares his experience firsthand of what it was like to interview Leonard Peltier just days after his release.
Thank you for joining us today, Graham. We appreciate your time. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, OCO, my name is Graham Lee Brewer, and I'm a national writer for the Associated Press, and I focus on Indian country. And I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation.
First, talk about how EP was able to arrange this interview.
He was insistent that his first interview on the outside be done by a Native journalist. And so really, I think that's the reason why I was able to. I'm sure it doesnn't hurt that I work for, the Associated Press, one of the largest news organizations in the world. But yeah, he really wanted to speak to a Native journalist first.
What was it like to be able to meet and interview Leonard Peltier? Where did the interview take place? And, what was your mood and his like?
He was in good spirits. We met at his home on the Turtle Mountain Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota. He even was wearing a replica sweater of the one that is from that famous photo of him being led in his extradition in handcuffs. And so I spoke to him on Tuesday, so it was a week since his release, and he was still kind of waking up in the middle of the night, fully expecting to be back in his cell. And he is an avid consumer of the news, even when he was still incarcerated. He is very up to date on world events. He even mentioned the rise of the far right in places like Germany. And the concerns that he have are the same ones that he had in the 70s, which is that he feels the federal government has energy interests on tribal lands, and that he doesn't see the Trump administration as any different in that regard, that he thinks that they're going to want the oil and minerals that exist in tribal lands. And so, his advice, his message, I think, to specifically young Native activists is that you have to show up. You have to be there. And, he emphasized that he doesn't think that should mean that you need to be violent, but he does think that just by being there, showing up in the thousands and resisting, saying that we're not going to stand for this is really, really important. And I think he also believes wholeheartedly that the coalition of people, even outside of Indian country, who now recognize that the issues that affect Native communities also affect them is much broader than when he first entered prison in the 1970s. And so that gave him a lot of hope too. And he really spoke to how seeing young activists in particular fighting for the same things that him and other AIM members fought for in the 70s was really one of the things that helped carry him through prison, gave him the strength to think that, he didn't do all of those things for nothing, and that his incarceration had meaning and purpose.
Well, clearly accusations that Peltier was involved in the murder of Anime Pictuaquash have become central to the discourse regarding his release. I would be remiss in not asking whether Peltier said anything else about this, and what kind of emotional reaction he had upon you questioning him about these accusations.
Well, like you mentioned, Kevin, that has become kind of a central part of the discussion when it comes to Leonard Peltier. And so I felt it was really important to ask that question, and also just to give him a chance to say in his own words, how he wanted to respond to that. He said that, he had no knowledge of her death, and he spoke, fondly about Anime, and that, that they were colleagues and friends, and that he feels that what happened to her was terrible, and that, he is glad that the two men, who were responsible for were prosecuted and incarcerated for it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, he reiterates that he had no knowledge of her death.
Did Peltier talk any more about the, emotional and psychological impact of having been incarcerated for 49 years?
He still maintains his innocence, that he didn't deserve to be in prison, and he deserves a full pardon. And that he does experience some anger when he thinks about what he's missed out on over these 49 years. He talked a lot about his grandkids in our interview too. But when he sees the support he got when he came home, it really gave him in his incarceration what he did miss out on. It gave it some meaning, and that was one of the parts of the interview where he started to get emotional, and was really, I could tell he was really trying hard to fight back his tears, because that meant a lot to him to come out and to hear people tell him, thank you for what you did. Thank you for standing up for Indigenous rights. And that, like I said, it gave his life purpose, because, the majority of his life was spent in a federal prison. And so I think, for him, he's still in a way kind of searching for what that all meant. He's still on a mission that he doesn't feel that he's fully fulfilled yet. And so he mentions in his book, Aboriginal sin, this idea that, being born Indian, you are inherently political. And so his entire life has been shaped by politics, and I don't think that he thinks that that's over by any means.
Well, I appreciate your time, Graham. And, thank you for your work, sharing Leonard's story, and sharing his story in his own words with the rest of the world. So I appreciate that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk about it.
Woolly, thank you. Woolly is good. So Woolly is thank you in a good way.
When Wes Studi appeared on PBS's Finding Your Roots, he got more than a family tree. ICT's Shirley Snavy chats with the Cherokee Star about discovery, identity, and DNA.
The episode is called Fathers and Sons. Harvard scholar Henry Louis Gates Jr. hosts the show. I asked Wes Studi about his appearance with LeVar Burton, an acclaimed actor and creator of the long-running PBS series Reading Rainbow.
Gates and others reached out to me maybe a year or so ago and said, asked if I would like to do it. And I gave it some consideration and thought that I could find out some things that I've always been wondering about, and decided to do so. They came to Santa Fe, set up a place to record, and started it. Well, of course, we had to do submit the DNA tests first, and then there
two different kinds of DNA tests and sent in. And then I guess, like I said, 9 months to a year, something like that, we were here shooting in Santa Fe.
The other person on the segment was LeVar Burton. Did you meet him?
No, it was all done different places, and they cut it together afterwards because it was a much longer interview, and the book of life that they put together, that you turn the pages and all that. It's there's much more of it than there is of the broadcast interview.
I thought it was interesting that they paired you with LeVar. I mean, in a way, you guys both found out some things that surprised you in your past, particularly with your lineage, didn't you?
Yeah, the lineage, not about my past, but the past of those who went before me in my family. I found out who my actual biological father was, and it was something that I had lived the larger part of my life always wondering about, because I had my doubts one way or the other. And I was actually raised by the Studis, and my stepfather was a Studi. And I've used that name since I was in second grade, you know.
I've been to some of the places that she passed through. I've been to many of these places, seen them. And I don't know, let's see. Yeah, it's, that's the most northern route. And it was in the wintertime.
Yeah.
They waited until the ground was a little more frozen and easier to walk on, rather than mud.
Yep.
A lot of places.
And she was in her late 20s or early 30s when she made that journey. What's it like to see that? To know the actual route?
It's good to know. It's good to know particulars and have a real story about how we got to where we are, because a lot of our family has been doing this genealogy thing and trying to figure out this and that. And so I'm bringing a wealth of information thanks to you and your program there.
The thing about it all was it seemed like it just provided more questions as much as it answered some questions. I had always wondered about anyway.
So what are you going to do about that? I mean, the Blair family, I mean, this was just like a real big revelation, is that the man listed on your birth certificate turned out not to be your father. Do you know if there's any Blair relatives around that you can connect with?
I understand from their research that yes, the family continues on, and since the airing, I've received emails from people as far away as South Carolina that have researched their genealogy and connected to that particular family. As a matter of fact, what was surprising about it all was, or one surprise in the whole thing, was that the original one, the Blair that they went back to as far as they possibly could, was a James Blair, who was known as the Paul Revere of the South. So that, to me, means that he must have been a part of the Confederacy.
When we did the We Shall Remain series with the American Experience people out of Boston, you got to play a Cherokee. And what I understand is that
First time.
the first time that you ever played a Cherokee. And
Yes.
I love the part when you talk about the importance of language. You went away to school and you came back and you tried to apparently talk like a white guy, and you really got reprimanded by your relatives.
Well, yeah, that was a funny part of the life we're in. Only took me something like 9 months to learn English, and then, like I said, went home after the first year of schooling, and I had essentially forgotten Cherokee at that point, and really didn't remember the process of having learned English. But I'm 5.5, 6 years old at the time, and yeah, that was. Luckily, I was young enough that I could relearn the Cherokee, immediately because, well, it was a necessity. I had to speak Cherokee in order to eat.
What do you think about the way things have been going in Hollywood lately with Killers of the Flower Moon's not by an Indian, but certainly featuring a Native American story, and Prey, is another one, and now Echo is coming out. So what do you think about this somewhat new popularity of Native American stories on television?
Well, I say yay for Lily, and Alakwa, I guess is her name. I've never heard it pronounced, but yeah, I think both of these actors are definitely making strides, and that's a wonderful thing. It's something that we've been working toward for all our careers, really. I mean, we're getting to the point of telling our own stories in certain ways, and that can only be a good thing, and the beginning of maybe a native inspired direction of filmmaking.
Well, Wes Studi, I really appreciate you joining us on the ICT Newscast. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, ICT, go.
UW-Madison is investing in Native students and acknowledging its roots. The Wisconsin Tribal Educational Promise covers tuition and housing for Native students. ICT's Erica AEC, in partnership with PBS Wisconsin, shows how the program supports education and honors the school's land-grant history.
It means a lot to me and my people, my community, the Native community. We are still here. We're still fighting for our right to be here.
Riley Aguirre is a freshman at the University of Wisconsin's Madison campus.
Education was used as assimilation to get rid of our culture, our language, our traditions, but now it's used as a way of teaching.
She's an enrolled member of the Oneida Nation and attending the university at no cost to her or her family, using the Wisconsin Tribal Education Promise program. How would your family have paid for college otherwise?
Other scholarships, definitely. Applying for scholarships outside of the school to help me as well, and probably funding through the tribe as well.
The Wisconsin Tribal Education Promise program provides financial support for students who are enrolled in one of the state's 11 federally recognized tribes. Carla Viju, Tribal Relations Director of UW-Madison, says the university wants to make the Madison campus more accessible to Native students.
We worked with tribal leaders from across the state to create the program, and now we're seeing the fruits of those labors. We're seeing our first class. We've got nearly 80 students in this first class, and we're hoping it will grow from here.
Tuition, housing, books, and all other school-related fees totaling about $30,000 are covered for undergraduate Native students through the Promise program.
It's not a taxpayer-funded program, and we're pretty proud that people want to support this program.
The program is funded through private donations. Viju says the legal precedent surrounding federally recognized tribes is a specific eligibility requirement for the students applying to the program.
Federally recognized tribes are sovereign nations who determine citizenship, and so that's a political classification. It's not a race or ethnicity.
Schools in nearly all 50 states offer some type of financial assistance for Native students. The program's unique. It includes medical students and law students. Tell me more about that.
We are hearing from people across the country, even in particular, about that law aspect. There's a lot of excitement around the law school.
Joseph Cornelius is Oneida. His father is a UW-Madison law school graduate who was worried about school loans for his son.
Initially, we were thinking that some of it would probably have to come out of my pockets or his pockets, and the fact that it was like, no worries, now I just have to worry about school, get good grades, and then it's all smooth sailing.
Undergraduate recipients of the Tribal Promise are reserved one wing of dorms inside the Smith Residence Hall. There's also an Indigenous Student Center close by that hosts tribal student groups like One Chic.
But I would say the One Chic House and Indigenous program have done a really good job at promoting the diversity here.
Viju says the university wants to do what's right for Wisconsin's Native people, considering the university is on Native land belonging to the Ho-Chunk, also known as the people of the Big Voice.
This is Ho-Chunk ancestral land, and I think there's now some sense of pride in that and wanting to share and celebrate that history. But there's also, with this promise, a chance to give back too.
The University of Wisconsin's Madison campus extends over 900 acres of land, including a 4-mile stretch of shoreline along Lake Mendota. But this land is the ancestral home to the Ho-Chunk Nation, the Native people who were living here for over 10,000 years. Through a series of treaties, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede or give up this land to the state of Wisconsin and the federal government.
The 1837 treaty wasn't a revered treaty at all. These are forced agreements to cede our land, such as that particular treaty, move west of the Mississippi, and relinquish our ownership of our historic homes.
John Greendeer, president of Ho-Chunk Nation, says the final treaty with the government was signed under duress.
We had 8 months to vacate, but then we didn't. And in the coldest parts of the winter, they shipped us in rail cars across to the neutral ground, and we suffered a lot for that.
Ho-Chunk were given $1.5 million for their land, but the government put most of it into interest-bearing trusts, leaving Ho-Chunk next to nothing.
I don't think any representatives of authority could walk away from one of those agreements and say they were the beneficiary of something.
Most of the Wisconsin Native tribes were forcibly moved to reservations, but Ho-Chunk people are spread across the state, with over 7,000 currently enrolled members. Greendeer says the treaties of the past are significant to their sovereignty of the present.
The treaties gave way to a lot and substantiated our abilities to negotiate not only with local governments, but also later on with these other little governments that were starting up with the education campuses with the UW.
Ho-Chunk had already surrendered this part of their land in an 1832 treaty, paving the way for UW-Madison to be built in 1848. Abraham Lincoln signed the Morrill Act in 1862, selling 1.3 million acres of tribal land in Wisconsin and using the proceeds to create so-called land-grant universities. And so today, the tuition promise extends to Native students across the state, a promise Greendeer calls late but fitting.
I think the Wisconsin Promise is a very old promise that is finally getting kept, at least at the UW level, at least at the college level.
108 years after the last treaty was signed, Robert Powless, an Oneida man, became the first Native to graduate from UW-Madison. Ada Deer, a Menominee Native, was the first woman. For Aguirre, a free university education on Native soil is personal.
Our education is not only for me, but for our community and for the resiliency of my ancestors. We fought so long through so many generations of trauma and abuse and neglect, and being here is like resiliency.
They were forcibly removed, and this university has spent some time coming to accept and share that story. And part of the reason this promise exists is because, there is some recognition that that all happened, but there's also, there's also the need and want to do what's right and good for Native people too.
A heritage marker was erected on UW-Madison's campus to recognize the ancestral home of Ho-Chunk. It's near Bascom Hill, which sits on top an effigy or burial mound built by Native people over 1,000 years ago. A series of 12 Ho-Chunk Circle Clan sculptures are outside the Baki Recreation and Wellbeing Center.
The promise is intended to be forever, right? I mean, Native American students have been around, since the beginning of what is now the United States, but been around since the inception of what is now this country, and I think the goal is to make sure that they're taken care of forever.
Both students are looking to use their education to better their communities.
I kind of want to go into wealth management or some maybe sustainability.
And amplify Native voices.
I do want to go into some field where I can be an advocate for possibly my tribe or other people, but definitely Native people as a whole, and getting our voices out there to be heard.
Reporting from Madison Ho-Chunk lands, I'm Erica Aisi for Here and Now and ICT.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.